Hello and welcome to our first eIdentity series of web chats. We are joined by John Bullard, Global Ambassador at Identrust, who is in charge of bank, government and corporate relations, focus mostly outside the US. And as a business and banker, he's been pushing the idea of eIdentity for many years and showing the world how vital it is in today's digital age.
Jack, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be talking with you on this brief webinar. I think that your support and interest in this topic is very relevant for your audience, and it's a privilege to be able to spend a few minutes talking through some of the issues that I've been living with over the last 16 years since I left Barclays to...
So the first question really is, what is trusted eIdentity? There are different aspects to it.
There are indeed, Jack, and thank you. You put up the first of how I generally look at 6 different dimensions of trusted eIdentity. And that first one is having absolute certainty of who you're interacting with. This isn't a new issue, but it is an issue that's grown in importance. Some of you may remember a remarkable cartoon that came out way back in July 1993, which was by a cartoonist called Peter Steiner in the New Yorker magazine. And it was a picture of a dog in front of a computer talking to another dog sitting on the floor next door and saying, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And of course, the role of eIdentity is to solve that exact problem, that you can be certain of who you're interacting with. So it's not only important to have certainty of who you're interacting with, but actually being able to check and validate that this is indeed the case. So you need some organization, some ability to be able, some third-party ability to say, yes, this really is who this person purports to be. Let's have a look at the third bullet. And knowing who guarantees the identity of that individual is essential. So if it turns out there's any problem, or if there's any issue about non-repudiation and those kind of things, there is a process that sits behind it that you can actually go to somebody who is guaranteeing that John really is John. Let's have a look at the next.
This is obviously key. That one strikes me as absolutely vital.
I mean, otherwise you really have no, when you're doing business, you have no idea that it could be anybody. So having a third party to say, yes, I am effectively guaranteeing that John really is John and Jack really is Jack, that is a foundation stone of trust. The next point is actually, and even this is changing over time, but it's important that you are able to attach a real name to that identity, and it's not just a number that could be attributed to any individual behind it. But even I would take that a stage further and say, if you start looking at the Internet of Things, which is just beginning to become an issue and to be a topic out in the marketplace, even the Internet of Things will require trusted identity. Am I really interacting with the automobile or whatever it is that I think I am interacting with? So having a real name behind it is essential as well. And the fifth one we like to have is having complete trust to act on their instructions. So
what does that mean?
Well, basically it means that having complete confidence, I think, is that perhaps another way of looking at it, that if the counterparty says, yes, go ahead, do this, then you can go ahead in confidence and do it. You are certain that the instruction has come from who it purports to come from, and it hasn't been changed on the way when it gets to you, and that nobody else has seen it, and that neither party can say, no, it wasn't me. So you need to have complete trust as an integral part of trusted digital identity.
And the final point here?
Well, this is where you come into the need for a transparent audit trail. And we all know of the ballooning problem of cybercrime at the moment. And of course, the crooks are more and more clever. The purpose of what a lot of the work that we do in Identrust is to make certain that the vast, vast majority of transactions that go across the world's internet, they are bona fide, they are good, normal people doing normal business and so on. Thus sifting out the few bad ones from the many, many good ones. We primarily focus, of course, on trusted, general business around banks and so on. But you need to have this transparent audit trail. If something does go wrong, you know where the buck stops. So those are for us are the 6 things that we identify by meaning what do we mean by trusted e-identity.
So what are the types of solutions we've got today?
Well, I put this slide together, Jack, for you because it's to me it's a relatively simple way of looking at 3 different areas, different sorts of solutions that operate today in the market. The first one at the top is solutions that are defined by national boundaries. So some of your audience may well know Bank ID in Norway or Bank ID in Sweden as examples. Now, those are 2 entirely separate electronic identity trust models, if you will.
So you can't use your Bank ID from Norway in Sweden?
That's exactly right. They grind to a halt at the border between Norway and Sweden. And this, wherever you're looking in a geographic terms, they will be limited by the nation state boundary, which clearly in an internet world is not the ideal solution. Another solution, of course, at the bottom left hand side are the solutions defined for single industry verticals. So I list pharmaceutical, aerospace, even national government solutions. And they're fine as far as they go. But if your business or if your life is transcending multiple different verticals, then you find yourself needing multiple different credentials, multiple different ways of identifying yourself over these different systems. So there are problems there. Of course, there will always be discrete single-purpose solutions for single-purpose, discrete, perhaps highly secure defense-related issues. But by and large, interoperability across industry verticals is becoming much more important. And the third solution, sort of grouping of solutions that we see in the marketplace are those solutions that are defined by a product or an application. So of which payments, of course, is the classic one, e-invoicing, logistics, but each one of those different frameworks covers a different piece of that, or a different application, as it were. So if you're moving from one application to the next, you need to have a different credential every time you do that, which again adds to complexity. So those are how we look at the main solutions that exist today, Jack. And of course, the nirvana for, and where we've been working in the Identrust world is at the intersection of all those 3. If I could have a credential that I can use in my business capacity that can enable me to transcend all of those different borders, then it actually becomes something that's very useful, very helpful to me. And we'll look at the next slide and see where it can be used.
So why is this important to banks and governments and so on?
Well, Jack, at the end of the day, everything is moving electronically. Everything is going online. And the concept behind what we do at Identrust is to think about, we started at the right-hand end of that transaction cycle. So at the payment end, which normally happens at the end of every single interaction. And if you think about a payment, it is basically the movement of bits and bytes electronically from one digital identity, which is called a bank account number, to another digital identity, another bank account number. And it's governed and managed through the payment system. So effectively, a payment is an application that sits on top of a trusted identity credential issued to each customer by their respective bank. So what we are looking at, and why we think this is of interest to business and to governments, as well as to the banks themselves, is to say, well, if we can use that credential in that right-hand vertical, in the payment space, and if we can then take that same credential and use it for those other applications which sit higher up the transaction cycle, if you will, so the things that happen before you reach the payment, then suddenly this becomes a rather useful credential to have in a business or indeed a government capacity. If I'm reusing that credential for multiple different purposes, and it is a credential that is already there and used in the payments world, then suddenly the role from the bank's perspective, the bank is helping its customer more. From the customer's perspective, they are getting better use out of their bank in managing the operational risk that goes with each one of these different stages of any transaction. So that's why, Jack, we think this is important.
So the key thing I'm taking from this is that the eIdentity has to go across all the different phases, business transaction, not just the payment. Is that an impossible dream?
No, it's not an impossible dream, Jack, and that's really why we believe that it is eminently not only is it doable, but it's essential that it does happen, because otherwise risk and danger of fraud as well as inefficiency becomes rife if you're having different solutions for each one of those different stages of any interaction. You can see how complex it could get. But if you're leveraging the role of the banker right the way through the transaction, then actually it starts to make sense, and it starts to make better use of the value of a bank in the operational risk field for its customer. So we think this is eminently possible, and indeed we think it is workable today. It works today.
And that is what we're going to be discussing in our next web chat on eIdentity, where we're going to look at the impact of a global trust network. Thank you very much, John. Most interesting.
Thank you, Jack. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to the next one.